This is just some bits of information or bits of things that I've gathered, and some of those have been something that I've stumbled on and crashed the Solr and burnt the servers and ripped out the hair of the server admins and so on, while trying to scale Solr to our installation. We currently have about 50 million, or actually it's more like 60 million records in the production index. So it's been a process, an ongoing process to scale it up and do stuff. It seems that sometimes that there are some pretty huge institutions running large indexes, but the information about those and how to set it up and how to work with the index is sometimes not so easy to find. So this is just a couple of pieces, and I try to keep it short anyway. And okay, so yesterday docValues came up while we were discussing Solr and the large installations, and I thought that it would be nice to give a short interview or short introduction to what docValues are. So the basic mechanism of how docValues are used as they are like direct index information that's stored on the disks. So usually we have the inverted index for searching, and the traditional way to do faceting and sorting and things like that is to uninvert the index in memory. And that works pretty well for small indexes, and when you don't have to use too much memory for the uninverted indexes. But when the index size grows, the warm-up period, trying to get the indexes uninverted and up and running and have enough information in the cache to actually serve the user, will raise and gradually become intolerable. And if that doesn't matter, that the commit takes like 5 minutes to complete or 10 minutes or whatever, however it goes, the problem is that the larger the Java heap, the more pressure it puts on the garbage collection, and the garbage collection with Java is sort of a fragile thing, or something that you if you need to tweak it, it can become quite laborsome and quite a heavy process. And sometimes if you do things that put too much pressure on garbage collection, there is nothing you can do. It's just it will just cause problems. So what you want to try avoid with garbage collection is full stop or stop the world pauses that actually stop the Solr server while it's trying to perform garbage collection to reclaim some memory that has been used. So that's the basis of actually quite a few things that we've changed or done with Solr. Try to minimize the memory usage. The additional benefit of using docValues is that you don't need the warm-up for creating the uninverted index. So commits are much faster, and well, you can do it much. You can, if you need to update the index regularly, you can actually do it, because you don't have to spend so much time waiting for the new index version to be up and running, and you don't need to worry about overlapping searchers trying to initialize, trying to load the index up. So there is less of chance of kind of ruining everything by committing too often before the index is actually up and running and serving the users. So you should be using docValues for all the fields that are used for faceting and sorting. So faceting is mentioned quite often, but sorting is also important, and using docValues for sorting is also something that benefits the performance in a large index. and also the ID field, especially in a sharded index where you need to sort of sort groups of records by their IDs. It's important to have it also use a docValue. If you enable docValues on an index without doing anything else, the index will require significantly more disk space. And that's because, well, you write more data on the disk. So you do it on indexing time and not on search time, like the uninverted index. And well, you need to keep that in mind and take that into account. I can't remember exactly how much our index grew when we enabled docValues, but there is one thing that you can do to sort of counter this effect is that the stored setting in the schema can often be turned off when you use docValues. Since Solr can actually use docValues to retrieve the field values, but docValues don't preserve order in multi-valued fields. So if that needs to be the case, like with auto role, if you use that field, which I don't particularly like because it's kind of distinct from the author field, you can't use docValues to preserve the actual field data. But anyway, to summarize, docValues are not necessary if you run a small index. What's a small index? I can't really say. But when the index gets larger and you have to increase the Java heap, that's the time to start considering docValues. A couple of other things are sharding and using different replica types. So when the index gets larger, if you look at the Solr user list, sharding is one thing that comes up quite soon. So sharding means that you actually split the index into multiple smaller parts. And that's beneficial because you can push updates to all those different parts simultaneously. You can do faceting from all those parts, especially with docValues. You can request the facet values from each shard simultaneously and then combine the results. Well, Solr does that, you don't have to do it. And also when the sort of pieces that comprise the full index are smaller, if you need to do recovery, it's much faster. Or if you need to replicate the index to another server, replicating just one shard is much faster than replicating a full index. Another thing is that's fairly recent in Solr is replica types. So traditionally there has only been one, and that's the NRT, the near real-time replica type. And this is something that can be used to searching and indexing, and it keeps a transaction log so that it can recover. So NRT nodes are the ones that works as the coordinating nodes, the leaders in a Solr cloud cluster. But then there are now different types of replicas, and pool replicas are something that we have started using. So traditionally, if you increase the number of replicas that you can use to provide search more capacity for searching, all of them actually do also the indexing work. So when you send a record to Solr, it has to do all the analysis, everything in the chain that's required for processing the records, processing the fields according to their types. But with pool replicas, you can just let the NRT ones do the work, and the pool replicas will pull the changes from those. So they just pull the files, the segment files from Solr, and so there is less work involved in actually keeping the indexes up to date. Also, it's possible to tell the searcher that it should always search the pool replicas and avoid searching from NRT replicas. And that will help the NRT replicas to only do the indexing work, so they don't have to maintain the filter caches and things like that. So that can also improve the memory usage. And if you had a really large system, you could just dedicate a couple of smaller nodes for indexing, and then put all the pool replicas on the larger nodes or the larger servers that would actually serve the user queries. So that can be beneficial. I can't say really how much that makes a difference, but I believe it's significant, and we have a pretty good throughput also during indexing time, and when the pool replicas are getting their changes, it's much faster to get those online, since the files are already in memory. So there is no warm-up from trying to get data from disk. And finally, there is something that's more on the index user side. So this is in VuFind side. So deep paging is something that's really nice to give the user, so that they can jump around in the search results. And by default, in Solr, you can always go to for example, last results page. If you have like an index of 100,000 records, it's quite fine. But if you have like say 10 million records, and you ask the last page from the index, Solr needs to do quite a bit of work, especially on a sharded index, because that means that Solr has to fetch all the record IDs preceding the one result page that you want, and also including that. So that means gathering millions of record IDs, merging the lists, and then returning the last ones that are the correct ones. And this means a huge load on memory. So it's pretty easy to bring a large Solr cluster into halt, or just cause it to go out of memory by requesting too many results, or results from a deep paging, or a page too high. So I don't recall if we have the limit now at 100,000 or at 10,000, but at least it's possible right now to limit the page. So even if you allow it, if you have a single shard, it can work. It worked for us. It may put some pressure on the server, but it's not that bad. But if it's sharded index, whoa, that's going to be bad. So don't do it. Just a couple of things that you need to be aware of. So that's all. If you have any questions or comments, I would be happy to answer or hear those. But otherwise, thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One being, I wonder if the docValues might be useful as a mechanism to replace the current alpha browse mechanism. If we have a list of values on disk, is that accessible in some way that might be useful for that?
I've actually thought about that, because we are not using the alpha browse as it is, because it's a way too heavy process to index and try to use it on a large index like ours. I think it should be possible. I don't know if there are currently tools to actually do it properly. Something resembling that might be possible using the faceting APIs, for instance, but I'm not sure. That's something that has been on my to-do list for a long while now. And in the past, when I tried it, it was almost there, and you could almost have some results. But there are some issues that are probably still remaining. And one of them is that usually you can sort the facets only by count and index. And index is it's not the natural sort by language or by some sort of local information. It's just a binary sort, so it won't provide like a magically sorted results, but it could be good enough for many cases. Another one is that there should probably be some kind of pre-indexing normalization of the fields, because normally you do faceting only on string fields, and there is no additional processing in those. You probably can't do everything that the current alpha browser does, because it allows that jumping in the index from random points to others. So you can start in the middle and then you can go back. And I don't think that will be easy to achieve, at least without poking Solr itself. But that's an interesting question, and it's something that I've been meaning to actually dive into, possibly by creating a Solr module for doing that. It might be an interesting exercise. Mm-hmm. But there is nothing more than that I can tell you right now.
If nothing else, it might even be a more efficient way to feed the existing browse indexer. I think the current mechanism of pulling the values out is perhaps more complex than it would need to be, but I could also be misremembering everything, so don't quote me on that.
Yeah. I've been meaning to also take a look at the Luke index walker. That's a piece of software that actually goes a little bit deeper into the Solr index. But something to do in the numerous times I have some free time.
I have a question in the audience.
So I have a question about the deep paging. I can imagine people asking for that feature, but I'm having trouble imagining a use case for it. Are there kind of known use cases for that type of search? And I'm specifically talking about the very, very large.
The question is whether you're aware of any existing use cases where people would want to do deep paging. Is this a theoretical reason, or if you block it, is that actually going to prevent people from doing something they legitimately want to do?
Well, one use case that's real is that sometimes, especially staff wants to see what's at the end of the results. But that can be usually done by providing also descending order in addition to ascending order. So that hasn't been a huge problem. That said, it was used before we prevented that, because our servers did go down occasionally. So I'm not sure. There is this sort of thing that happens when you Google for search results. If there's nothing on the first page, it seems that the results are not relevant. You just jump to some other place onto page 10 to see how it goes. So it might be one part of a process where you try to see if the full result set contains something useful for you. So that is at least one thing that comes to my mind. And of course, there are some other mechanisms apart from the user interface where some deep paging has been used. One of them was building of the record hierarchy for hierarchical records, and that was changed to use the what was it again? That cursor mark functionality that Solr provides for going deeper into the search result. And cursor mark is great, but it's more useful for iterating through the whole result set rather than jumping to an arbitrary page in the results. Another place where I have the open pull request is the OAI PMH provider, which is currently using deep paging to provide the results. And it makes sense, but it doesn't work properly. So it needs to change also to cursor mark.
All right, thank you.